Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we get to the wheel arch repair, we need to start removing other parts because, as I said in the last welding video, everything's kind of connected, whereas as I say, the wheel arch repair is connected to the front valance that we need to remove and repair. And to remove that once we get that front valance out, we want to remove the engine and transmission. So before I go any further, I want to do some preparations for that. So last week I removed the drive shaft, which wasn't such a big deal, wasn't necessary to video that. I did have to grind off the rear bolts of the drive shaft with one of these angled, can't think of the name of these things now, you know the things, one of these things with a little grinding wheel. That was good because I could get in there and just slice into the nut head, and they came free really easily. And I did screw up because, you know, there's a nut that splices the two drive shafts together and it slides. Anyway, as I was trying to pull away from the front flex plate, the darn shaft came apart, and I hadn't marked it yet, but I hadn't moved it, and I gently put it back together again and marked it. Fingers crossed everything goes back together. But once I got it out, I felt that the UV joints were a little notchy. They weren't perfect, you know, weren't smooth. I've had experience with taking the drive shaft off my 6-cylinder 108, and I sent that off to be rebalanced, and with this, it's a 6.3, obviously they're as rare as hen's teeth, aren't they? So I'm going to find a drive shaft shop locally, probably in Sacramento, get them to redo the UV joints and balance the shaft essentially. So I wasn't too bothered about it coming apart on me. So that's something for the future, obviously. That's a fair ways down the road. Anyway, so consequently that moves me to the rear axle. I'll show you in a minute. I've made some big blocks up so that the rear axle is just sitting there and not axle stands on it. I made some big towers up with some 2x4s. So start breaking down the rear axle and removing that. Anyway, so then that leads on to the brake calipers. Now, if you are in the group in the last week or so, you'll see that I removed the caliper on the passenger rear side. Frozen solid, those calipers were, completely compressed air. Forget about it, it wasn't doing it. So a couple of suggestions came through. I've been soaking them in Coca-Cola for 24 hours and introduced some heat. That did break it a little loose, but still it wasn't having it. So all I'm going to show you is how I'm going to work on this next one on the driver's side rear, and we'll see if we can break it free just with the same method I used on the other one. I didn't invent this method. I did my old YouTube searches and found this method. It seemed to work really well, and I tried it and it worked this morning. So anyway, let's get over there. So this is kind of a rear caliper video, I guess you want to say, but we'll get stuck into removing the rear axle in another video, and obviously then move away back forward to get the engine out. So let's have a look at that caliper. Right, we've got two calipers here. This is off of a standard 280 108. Couple of differences. The pistons are that much smaller than the 6.3 rear calipers, plus also this is where obviously the disc goes, the rotor I should say. This one is substantially wider to accommodate the vented rotor, you see, and if you look carefully here, there's a spacer in between these two halves. Now what I could do, I guess, if I really got stuck, I could return the car to a solid rear rotor, but I'm kind of stubborn and I wanted to see if I could keep the original calipers, because that's the whole point of it, you know, keep it as original as possible. And the challenge to rebuild something so kind of crappy looking is a bit fun. So if we fail, there's other routes. I could probably source a couple of 6.3 rear calipers if it really comes to it. I'm cleaning the other one right now, so I haven't been able to assess the condition of the bores inside the caliper, but anyway, we'll check this one out. So first things first, we'll take these pads out, and then I am going to show you what I did. Now this one, obviously I haven't soaked in Coca-Cola or any, and we're just going to go ahead and try and pull those bores out without doing that. So let's get those pins out first. I've got a puncher around here somewhere. Let's get these pins, get the pads out. And you can see these ones are slightly out. You can see they're quite a bit bigger, the bores on the 6.3 rears. So anyway, so I will show you what we're going to do. Some of you are probably going to guess, but let's see if we can do it without any soaking and see what we come up with. Now obviously there's various ways. Introducing compressed air. Obviously put a block in here first so the pistons don't come flying out. But with these ones, I think this car sat in a moist area at the rear of the car, because there does seem to be more problems towards the rear, you know, ranging from the, you know, the seized calipers to the bodywork, you know, some rust back there. So I'm thinking maybe it sat in some long grass or something for many years, and it just had a lot more problems. So anyway, this is a standard grease gun. Let me zoom out here. Very standard grease gun you get at any automotive store. This is one of the bigger ones. I removed the Zerk fitting end for the Zerk fittings, and lo and behold, that threads straight into the brake hose line of these calipers, which is kind of convenient, isn't it? Now you do need a fair amount of grease to fill these calipers up, to pressurize them. Let me get that started. There we go. See, look at that. Now let me get a wrench on that. There we go. Get that little tighten up. It's quite convenient that this is the same thread. Let's nip that up. Now let's see what we can do here. Now let me get a piece of wood to stop them flying out. Not that I think any flying is going to happen. Let's think here. Hammer to the handle to the hammer I've got here. That should do the trick. So let's see, fingers crossed. Start pressurizing them. There you go, one's already moving. Now we don't want that to pop out. It should hit the hammer handle before. Let's put a little spacer in there because I don't want that flying out, that one, you see. That'll do, just to wedge it. That'll hold that now, you see, and then that should start pressurizing the other one. Lo and behold, look at that. So you can see that left one starting to come out. Before it gets too close to that hammer, I'm gonna release the bleed screw to get my hammer out. To release some pressure. Get the old bloody hammer out now. There we go. Okay, so tighten up that bleed screw again. And basically we want to try and bring them out one at a time, you know, from one side to the other, so one doesn't just fly out and then we lose pressure essentially then, don't we? So where's my G-clamp? Okay. We'll hold this guy back, stop him from moving, and then give this a couple of squirts. See that one there? Very gently. Release him. Jam this one again, you see. Hold him there. There's the other one. A little bit more. because they're full of grease now, you see, these, I've got to a point now where I think, you know, we can grab them with a pair of channel locks or something and just ease them out. But let's do a little bit on that one. Pull this one out a little bit more. It'll probably pop any second. A little bit of surface rust, a little bit of pitting right at the front edge there, but that's alright, as long as it's not towards the rear. Right, let's see which one pops first, do we? I think we got them now. Yeah, this one's coming first, I think. I think we lost pressure now anyway, so there you go, that worked pretty good, didn't it? So it's obviously full of brake fluid and grease. What I had to do, I had to put that one back in again because this one was still having a bit of trouble. I didn't want to damage it, and I shoved that one back in, held that one, and then popped this one. You could hear it pop all of a sudden. So it's kind of a balancing act, you know, to get pressure evenly distributed until they're enough that where they'll just come out on their own, you know. So see, that one is nice and loose. This one still feels stiff, but I think I can get a pair mole grips on those and they should come out. So just gently grab that front edge there, just gently work it. There you go, see, still looks stiff there, but it's coming out. There we go, see. I'm trying not to get grease all over the camera here. Hands are a bit filthy after doing this, but okay, so the next thing, this is the one I did yesterday. The other one that we just did is soaking to get all that grease rubbish out. So what I'm going to do, I'll show you. These are already been loosened, these bolts to hold the caliper halves together, so they're not that, oops, what am I doing here? They're not that tight, so vented rotors, which is kind of a overkill, I guess, in the rear, because most of your braking power, of course, is at the front. But anyway, who am I to question? And I know some of you go, oh, these shouldn't be split, he's not going to be able to find the seals. Now I'll show you. I have found the seals. Where is it? There we go. Now, I spoke to Aaron Householder, and the seals can be bought. They're the round, but they're square, essentially square-edged seals that are on both halves here. This is the same for the regular ones as well. Now, these are the faces here. Now here, the bolts out. Here are the spacers. These are just spacers to build up the width for the extra thick of the vented rotor. Now, like I say, if that was the only difference, then we're good to go with using the old 280 one and just putting these spacers in, but it's not the same. This bore is bigger on these ones, so if I'm going to keep these and keep it as it should be, I want to keep that same bore. And I've ordered the rebuild kit. Now I'm thinking I'll have to check the rebuild kit. I wouldn't mind betting my rebuild kit is only good for these ones, so I'm going to have to get the 6.3 one. So anyway, so obviously on these ones where it has spacers, you've got extra seals. If this was a standard, you've got a seal here, two halves go together, okay? But obviously you've got this extra spacer, so there's 4 seals on these extra big ones. I will put a link to the place where I got these seals, and that was given to me by Aaron. I think he gave me the part number, and it turns out these seals are the same as on the G-Wagon, the modern G-Wagon. I bought them in Vallejo. I think it was a company down in Vallejo. I can't think of the name right now, but not very expensive little seals that's sitting there. So I don't think it's a big deal splitting these. Obviously I'm going to rebuild these and put a zinc and yellow chromate finish on them, get them really nice looking. But first things first is to get all this grease and rubbish out of there, isn't it? So, okay, that's that. Now, as far as the pistons go, there's some surface rust on them, but I'm not seeing any pitting. And once I clean these up, a bit of that, there's a little pitting on that front edge there, but that's in front of the seal. It's where you don't want is the pitting back here, do you? Because then it could leak. But and even if these were trashed, I mean, I can get new pistons. That's kind of shitty looking, but anyway, excuse my French. So let's I'm going to clean all these up, and then obviously the main thing is to check these bores, and from first inspection they seem fine. They're very similar to this with a few bits of surface rust, and I think they look very much like the front ones. And like I say, this I think was sitting in a moist climate at the rear. You know, brake fluids don't get changed, do they? And then moisture gets back and then they jam up. So as a result, that is, to be able to get those pistons out. So let me go and show you some other things on the car, what we've been doing. Okay, these are the towers I told you about. I've cut them, all these 2x4s cut to 15 inches in length, and then essentially all screwed together in just a big tower. They're 11 tall, I think, brings us up to around 17.5 inches, around that. I've put them underneath, spreading the load under the jack point there, and that obviously enables the axle to hang free to enable me to work on it and remove it. So that's, and obviously I've got both sides, and I'll probably make 4 up, you know, for the car, you know, so we've got everything level before we make our flipping stand, where we're going to flip this whole car on its side. I hear you say, what has he got in the future? And so anyway, that's for a future video, because I tell you, I'm not crawling around under this car anymore doing the body work. I'm going to flip it onto its side, and I think a rotisserie in this garage is going to be a bit tough because of room. I could do it, but then the car would have to be on a diagonal and I wouldn't be able to get my other car in. So that's my thought process right now. Now, as you can see here, we've got the Patch King has struck again. This guy that ever welded this car up, look, he slapped a patch on there. And look, there's even a little tiny hole there already developing. He's obviously patched that straight over rust. He's got another one here, I believe. This all feels pretty solid back here, but he's definitely just slapped that on there, which is really pretty too bad. And then see this kind of ragged edge here. I don't know what you can see in this light, but this needs all tidying up. So once we get this axle out of the way and this car on its side, we'll have a good old inspection of there. And then we got to get into all this area. So there's tons of work to do here. Let me go on the other side, which was probably going to be the most horrifying side that you've seen so far. Okay, this is the other side. You can see we've got a dirty grey hole here, right? And then Mr. Patchy, I can feel it, he's patched straight over other metal there. So all of this has got to be cut back. And there's a box unit back here that is corroded. You can see all the corrosion. That's going to be, once I get under there, I'm going to have to cut it probably on the other side, ways back, and essentially build a new box. You can see that, right, I'll state. And this edge here is kind of, feels solid, but we'll have to get in there and have a good old look. Now, I'm not going to get under the rocker. The inner rocker and the outer rocker on this side are pretty bad shape, so that's for another time. So let's see, there's the old rotor here. That came off pretty easy. And the rotors, as I say, they're the vented rotors, and they're just filthy. They feel like they've got very little wear on them. And I'm assuming these are original Mercedes ones, which we'll keep those. Why not? We'll get them cleaned up. We'll probably remove the half shafts and do the rear bearings. I've done that on my 280 before. It's not too bad actually, not too bad of a job. And I'd love some input on what else I should pay attention to on this rear axle, you know, seals and what have you. Let me crawl under the car and I'll show you how far we've got with the removal of the axle and all that good stuff. Okay, so see this arm here, okay, now that is bolted to that bolt there, right, and then there's a triangular plate, I'll show you on the bench later, that bolts onto that, and there's a rubber bushing in this trailing arm. Now that's not too bad on an air suspension car, but on a sprung car obviously you have to, I'd probably put a jack on this and then just gently lower it down to remove the rear spring. I don't think it's as dodgy as the front one, but don't you know, count on me for that, you know, so use extra caution when you're dealing with any of these springs on these cars, because they could quite easily kill somebody. So anyway, that was pretty straightforward. I soaked all the bolts there over a period of weeks and months before I even attempted to come under here. You can see the fuel lines now. I pulled those down out the way because I was assessing rocker damage. So obviously all fuel lines are going to be replaced. Fuel lines, air lines, brake lines, all that good stuff. Here, up above here, yeah, there's the rear driver's side airbag. I've got the other one out of the passenger side. Now the way these connect, there's a bolt that bolts in here through this trailing arm, right, straight into there, so it connects it, right, and then the other bolts on the top side, there's two underneath the rear seat in the back, and one just in the corner in the trunk. So it's essentially those tanks are held on by three nut and bolt stuff on the top. Then obviously I've got to disconnect the air feeder lines, and then there's one coming in and one going over to the other bag. There's only a single one on the passenger side. Then what I do, I've got to refer to my manual. Obviously we've got this anti-sway bar here. Let me get the light. Okay, we've got the anti-sway bar here. We've got to disconnect all that. I'm going to leave the shocks in place to hold the axle. I'll obviously support it with a jack, and then there's obviously the big bushing at the top here that undoes from the trunk. I haven't disconnected this air valve yet because I wanted to clean this area before I started to disturb these nuts, so we don't introduce any dirt in there. And I may have said this before, this air valve, it might be just optimistic thinking, but to me this air valve really stands out underneath all this filth here that is extremely clean. And there's some yellow marking plain here. This might be from the factory, admittedly, but I'm wondering if he's had this rear valve rebuilt at some point, because the cadmium plating and stuff is not completely shot like the other ones. So I'm wondering if he's had this rebuilt or whatever. But anyway, that's down the road. This boot looks in very good shape, but that's something I'd like some advice on, everything to do with the rear axle, because I know very little on the rear axle of what should be attended to while it's on the bench. And I obviously want to take care of anything like that on the bench rather than inside the car. So what else under here? Like I say, the big drama is all down the driver's side for welding and that, but once this car's flipped onto its side, it's going to make it so much easier to do that kind of work, and you do better work as well if you're comfortable. You know, crawling around underneath this thing is no fun, and I'm not getting any younger. So what else? We've just above our head here obviously is where the fuel tank goes. That's all been repainted, boiled and everything. That's all done pretty much, sitting and waiting. I've got a new fuel pump that's ready to go on when this is all done. This corrosion here is tied in with the, you know, the lower wells of the trunk, and you know that I had to stop that because I jumped to the front, but these I will tend to in the coming months. So I think that is about it. Let me show you the airbag on the bench, the one that I took off of this side, and then we'll finish up with showing you how far I got with the front suspension. So there she is. Sorry looking thing, isn't it? So obviously the rubber completely, you can see all the fibres even breaking through here, completely shot. Look at that. I mean, that's got to be, man, it's got to be 20, 25 years old or more, wouldn't you think? I mean, that's just terrible. We'll pull all this apart just like we did the front ones and repaint them, get them all spiffy looking again, re-yellow chromate that support ring. I'll buy new airbags. Well, I got my last ones from Kent over at Mercedes Source. He got some new airbags that he had, and so they do have dates on them. So they are printed with a date. So if you get some new airbags, just check that date. It's not too old. So that's that. And this is kind of, oh, here's one other thing. This is that plate for the kind of front arm of the rear suspension. You've seen all these before. It's a very typical thing you've seen on these Mercedes and probably others as well. Just 3 bolts there, and that's where that bolts through in that bushing part. These are obviously going to get cleaned up and re-blacked or whatever. So anyway, let's go and show you the front suspension. Excuse the lighting's not so good in here right now. I've lost a couple of bulbs, but there we are so far with the front suspension. What I've got here, this pressure gauge, I let it out a little bit the other day, but I've been pressurizing them to about 4.5 bar, 5 bar, these tanks, and just monitoring the pressure that it's holding and not leaking down. I bought this pressure gauge from 600 air suspension, you know, Martin Warmhausen, I think his name is. Really nice bloke, very helpful. Basically a little Schrader valve goes in here. You pump up the old airbag here, plug this in, and what I did, I took a picture of the gauge and I've just been comparing it, you know. So I'll tell you what, I'll get the tripod on and we'll pump that other one up. I'll show you what that's like in a sec. Now also, if you were on the group little chat the other week, when I took the subframe off, there were these spacers. Here's one, a spacer, right? Let me get the other one. I've re-blacked them with some black chromate. So this spacer went on top of the subframe mount, and this goes in here. Now, we were scratching our heads, everybody, what we thought that was there for, and what we've come to conclusion is for extra room for the 6.3 motor inside the engine bay, because essentially, when you think about it, once this is inserted, it essentially pushes the engine down that much, and that's a 3/4 inch plate. Made sense to me. This one, I've just been checking fitment and everything. Now, what I did notice with this, if you can see that bolt, see this one, it's canted over slightly. So I'm not able to get this thing in because it's fighting it. And if I was to try and do that on the car, you'd never get the bolt in. So you can see this subframe, this is a new one, this is slightly bent there. So I'm going to have to straighten that, make sure everything goes together nicely. You don't want to be struggling with that when you're trying to remount this. What else? I haven't knocked over these lock washers yet because I'm not sure whether everything's, you know, I might have to take it on and off a bit. Everything's been greased. It's all nice and greased and solid. New Zerk fittings, new engine mounts. I think I did a little video of those. Yellow chromated all the brackets ready for the air suspension lines. This is where the air valves mount. I chromated the bolts and everything. Obviously we haven't got the lower control arms yet on. I've been bolting those on. I put new buffers on here, these guys. Those, what I did actually, I wrapped them in a towel, you know, so they didn't burn themselves, and then put them in the oven at about 150 degrees for about 5-10 minutes, and it softened them, and then a little bit of fairy liquid inside the hole, and they went in a treat. So that's that. There's the other one, ready to put its kingpin essentially on there. Let's see, here's the old calipers. This one's all rebuilt now. This is, I put new seals in it. This has got all new seals and shims and stuff in. I black chromated the bolts. Now I have not torqued those bolts down, but they does have new seals in this caliper. I want to probably talk to Aaron about the torque specs on those bolts, because I don't see it anywhere. That hasn't got seals in yet, but I've got to do that. So yeah, everything's coming along nicely. Yeah, let me get the camera on a tripod and I'll show you pumping that airbag up, shall we? Okay, so we've got the Schrader valve here. That screws in to the tank. Does have a little seal on it. And that's a 14mm wrench. Get that on there. Let's get the old air line. That air you can hear is out my own line. I don't know if you can see the gauge here. So let's see. Turn the light on and we're going to put it. It's on bar right now. So let's watch the tank in the background there. See if we can get that. See? See? Let's start lifting the suspension up. We got 1.86. Let's chuck about 4.5 bar in there. 2.75. 3.5. 4.46. That's just leaking down. That's not the tank. That's my dodgy valve here. So, right. So that's pressurized to about nearly 5 bar. Do it quick, you see. As long as it stays consistent. You can see the gauge. What are we reading out? My old eyes, man. Just shy of 5 bar. Now what I've been doing, you see, is taking a picture of that with my cell phone and then just comparing it each day. And as long as we don't get any leak down. See, like for instance, that we could we've got a release valve here. We can bring it down to a level 4 or something like that. That's 4 bar. And just hold there, you see, or whatever. I think it's 4 or 5 bar. I'd have to look in the manual, but obviously before everything goes in, we'll test this. But I've been testing these on and off for a few days now, and we haven't got any leaks whatsoever. It's amazing how strong that rubber is, just like tyre rubber, really, isn't it? So, so we just leave that filled up, and we'll see how we go. Well, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Sorry about the lighting in here, it's really rubbish. I've got to get some new bulbs. Well, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and please hit subscribe and the like and share button if you like what you saw, and I'll see you in the next one. Alright, take care everyone, bye bye.